We'll get started in just a moment. And for those who'd like to do the opening chant together, we're going to be on page 30 in the chant book. And the link should be right below your screen in the YouTube page. If you look below the screen, there should be a link to the Common Ground chant book. And then if you go to page 30, there's this chant we do quite often, Suffusion with the Divine Abidings. And often for short, we just call it the 4 quarters chant. So you can find that, and we'll do that in probably just a minute. And for those who haven't experimented in the Buddhist teachings, one of the most simple, easiest ways to taste that freedom that the Buddha points to, the teachings of the Buddha point to, we have these seemingly philosophical sounding terms like emptiness or not self, but just in simple, ordinary moments where the heart is open and generous and kind. In those ordinary moments, the mind has transcended, you could say, or gone beyond its self-centered dramas for a moment or for some moments. Anytime there's a natural appreciation and a natural generosity, a natural tenderness, compassion, or kindness, there's that flavor of the mind, of the heart being released from the self-centered orbit that we normally spin with, where it's all about me. Even if I'm talking about you or talking about the world, somehow in all kinds of little and big ways, we're still the star, the neurotic star of our stories that we're repeating internally, externally. So this is a real profound insight to realize how powerful, normal, ordinary moments of love are in terms of transforming one of the deepest habits in the mind to organize meaning in the self-centered way. So instead of trying to understand not self, the impersonal nature, philosophically or intellectually, one of the most useful pragmatic practices is just to become more confident in this possibility of relating to this moment, any moment, in a kind way, in a loving way, in a tender-hearted way. And this is the important piece, to notice the freedom that's there, natural freedom, subtle initially, but we'll learn to, in a way, enliven it by noticing it. This freedom, this absence of self-centeredness, when the mind is kind and compassionate and appreciative and balanced. And this is a really useful chant, kind of a chant of confidence in the capacity of our heart to love in these natural, organic ways, these 4 attitudes of love: basic friendliness, what we normally call loving kindness; tenderheartedness, what we call compassion; appreciation, here it's translated as gladness; and equanimity, this beautiful, radiant balance. So equanimity isn't passive, it's quite an enlivened, energetic state of the heart. So we're on page 30. Let's do this chant together, and then we'll sit. Now let us make the 4 boundless qualities shine forth. I will abide, pervading 1 quarter, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with compassion, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with gladness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with equanimity, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. And take a little time, settle into a comfortable posture for our meditation time for about 30 minutes. Like it or not, taking this moment as our home, the way it is now. And learning to fully embody the experience of sitting and feeling the structure of the body, the breathing body. And notice this natural sensitivity to the sensations of the body, feeling sensation. And then the subtle addition here. So we're feeling sensation. Now notice that you're recognizing that you're feeling the sensations of the body. Or we're recognizing that we're knowing the sensations of the body sitting. And this is what we mean by mindful awareness. It's this simple recognition of what the mind is knowing. And in this case, because we're using the physicality of the body, we're using embodiment as an anchor, a place to train the heart to be mindful. Then we're remembering, we're recognizing that these sensations are being known. Remembering to recognize these sensations are being known, being felt. Whole body, the totality of the sitting body is like this, which includes the natural rhythm of breathing in and breathing out, whatever that feels like right now. And we're not being told that the sensations should be pleasant or should be unpleasant or whatever. They're just going to be what they're going to be now. And this, in a very real sense, can be a refuge. This is how the body is now. And there's a kind of certainty, a kind of refuge in knowing that right now it's like this. And it really opens the possibility, well, can the heart be at peace? Can the heart be in a peaceful way of relating to how it is now? This dynamic experience of body, sensation. And what really helps having a balanced, peaceful relationship to the body is remembering this subtle piece that these sensations are being known. So what we might say, being aware of what the mind is knowing, being aware of what the mind might be feeling. And this is what brings that wisdom space into the moment. Oh yeah, this is being known. It begins to bring in at least the wise space of equanimity and non-attachment. Whenever wisdom is able to recognize that this is being known, the physicality of the sitting body, the breathing body is being known, being felt. And so then in the same way, when distraction arises, we notice the mind worrying or planning or whatever. Oh, this thinking is being known. It feels like this, looks like this. So, to put it into words, we say that the knowing mind isn't stained or contaminated by what's being known, what's being felt. In the same way that a mirror doesn't get disturbed by what it's reflecting. And this is just a way of understanding how it is that equanimity surprisingly shows up when the mind is mindfully aware. So let's continue in silence now. And in a way, there are three aspects to our motivation to sustain present moment awareness. One is just an interest, a curiosity, and related is this intuition of freedom that arises naturally with mindful awareness. And then the last is a deepening of fearlessness. I'm not afraid to be right in the middle, not afraid to be open and sensitive, not afraid to see things just as they are. So you can rely on those three motivating qualities: curiosity, this natural attraction to the freedom of non-attachment, sensing that freedom, and this deep resolve not to fall into reactivity of fear and control, because we know it doesn't help. So it's often hard work what we're doing, this remembering, oh, this is being known. And initially it might even feel somewhat awkward or self-conscious to remember, oh yeah, this is being known. This is what the mind is knowing. This is what the mind is doing right now. It's just this experience of the body, this experience of the mind being known. But that's because we're creating or deepening a habit, this habit of mindful awareness, which is this remembering to recognize the present moment. And it's always okay. It's always possible to begin again. No matter how distracted or lost the mind has been, it's possible in the next moment to realize, oh, it's just this being known. It's just this being felt. And then we're back on track. How to sustain that recognition that this is being known. And of course, there's no need, no functional need for judgment, feeling guilty about being distracted. Whatever it is that's showing up in the body and the mind, this is being known. So there can be that recognition. It's just this experience being felt and being known. Feels like this. And this mindful recognition of the way it is has this power to release the squeeze of the heart from any self-centered drama. Being good, being bad, or anything in between. Any conceit whatsoever. Because whatever it is, it's just this experience being known. And we can leave it at that. That understanding in a deep way is complete. So take another moment or two and just keep recognizing in a relaxed way that this experience is being known, being felt. It's just this experience being known. And how that allows for really profound intimacy and a profound balance, non-attachment. This is how we understand our practice, this coming together of intimacy and non-attachment. So take a little time, adjust the body so you're comfortable. It's really nice to be with everybody this morning, and as I often say, it's really useful to take a little time, especially being on live stream where we don't see each other, to just sense the community that we're practicing with, both those who are here now, those who will listen later, but even more so, just this great lineage of folks before us and that will follow after us that have enough space in their lives, enough privilege really to be able to be reflective and are using this space that they have not to fill it up with the distraction, but to really get interested in the nature of our heart. And that we're being together today in this way, we're really joining this very wide and deep stream of beings that are interested in understanding. And that it's not a rejection of life. And I really want to talk about this, these wholesome, beautiful spiritual instincts cannot be and are not a rejection of life. It's really about wanting to understand deeply what to do with this life in a way that, allows something beautiful and healing to happen in our lives and more generally in the world around us. So the last few weeks I've been talking about this duality of domination and helplessness, and how the Buddha, right from the beginning of his years as a teacher, talked about this middle way that isn't about controlling and attaining and dominating our experience. And it isn't about giving up on life, giving up on having a mind and body because it's complex, because it's messy, not emphasizing distraction and denial because things are complex and difficult. So on the one hand, we have all the different varieties of giving up And on the other hand, the other basic category of strategies are all the ways that we want to take control and master life. And in that sense, so it's not just that terrible sense of domination where we're really abusing, but even in the sense of developing competency so that we can have a lot of skill in terms of how we interact with life. So, of course, neither letting go and giving up, nor wanting to control, wanting to master, neither of those are inherently unskillful. They're just not going to lead to any ultimate satisfaction. So it's the abandoning of those two poles, those opposites in a sense. And so today I'd like to talk about this resolution or this resolving of duality. And we're in this world where, as we come into our bodies, come into our emotional lives, our conditioned minds and hearts, we have this sort of electric current of desire. I'm sure you've noticed. In a way, it's the most obvious thing about being a human being is this electric current of desire, wanting this, fearing that, being moved and often tormented by our likes and dislikes. Or in early Buddhism, we talk about the 8 worldly winds of gain and loss, pain and pleasure, fame and disrepute, praise and blame. So it's just outlining the different dualities that dominate and condition our lives all the time. And so much of each day, each moment, is us navigating our likes and dislikes, pleasure and pain, navigating praise and blame, wanting to be liked, wanting to avoid being not liked, fame and disrepute, success and failure, these sort of dualities. This is just ordinary human life, right? Where we're focused on these dualities, and in a way they animate our lives. The tensions of our likes and dislikes, they kind of give meaning and direction to what I'm doing one moment after the next, pursuing something I want, getting away from something I fear or something I think that would be, not good to happen. So then, this is where it's helpful. We can better understand maybe what I've been meaning by domination. I guess domination was on this side and helplessness on this other side, because it's really in terms of these habits of liking and not liking and this current of desire, where then I want to either, really manage and master and fulfill this current of desire, or I feel oppressed by it and I want to be done with it. I don't like having desire. I don't like being obsessed and addicted and in need of, or feeling better than, feeling worse than. I just want out. So that leaves us with this question, as we understand, appreciate the truth of dualities and how much they dominate our lives. Think about politics. Think about the people we work with. It's so easy, it's so common for us to divide things, to interpret things as good and bad. We walk down the shopping aisle and we look at all the different, soap products, or all the different shampoo products, or all the different soup products. And immediately it's so, these are the good soups, these are the bad soups. And this is the good shampoo, this is the bad shampoo. These are the good people, these are the bad people. It's just how our mind has been conditioned. And then the sense of self is constantly being constructed and interpreted in terms of those things we like and dislike. So then the practice question, the very pragmatic, real question for us is, given that we have this current of desire, that we notice what we like and dislike, and giving up on that project, or that capacity to have likes and dislikes, is itself just another like I want to be done with it. I don't want to have likes and dislikes. It's just the next like, and it's like the whole trip of being a hermit or whatever our version of trying to get the heck out of it, right? Sitting on our couch and not doing anything. So the practice question is, how can we fully and completely own, embody, feel the current of desire that's real, right? There is this current of desire to survive, to connect, to belong, to be loved and to love, to do, right? There's so many, wholesome expressions of that current of desire. Desire itself is not bad. What causes problems, what causes suffering for us and for others, is when we misunderstand, misinterpret the current of desire. And we imagine that that current of desire is me. Then I have a very toxic, not helpful relationship to the current of desire. So that, again, the practice question is, how do we embody these currents of desire without being confused by them? Without neurotically constructing stories based on the current of desire that stars me, this idea of me that I cling to, that I have to defend, that really is the birth of greed and hatred and fear. And the truthful answer is, I don't know what the answer to that question is. How do we, given that we have this human existence where there are these currents of desires moving, enlivening this life all the time, sexual desire, desire for food, desire to belong, desire to do stuff, right, to be productive. We have so many different flavors of this, let's call them life desires, these currents of life energy. That's really what they are. There is, natural, as much of nature as anything is nature. We're not outside of nature. So the question is, what do we do with these currents? How do we understand them in a way that doesn't contribute or doesn't lead to suffering for ourselves and for others? And like I was saying, I think the best first step is to realize we don't know the answer, because then we're really interested in getting close to these currents of desires. I don't know if I read this last week, but there's this little line. I read something else, I think, by Wendell Berry, but there's this short line where he writes, "Make a poem that doesn't disturb the silence from which it came." And to me, this is really what I'd like to talk about today. How do we make a poem? How do we craft a life, a way of living, a way of being that doesn't disturb the silence, the whole, the singularity, if you like physics, the emptiness, if you like Buddhism, right? That doesn't disturb the thusness and suchness of the present moment of reality, the reality of here and now, right? How to make a poem, how to let these currents of desire express themselves in our lives through words and thought and emotion and action without disturbing. In one of the Buddhist texts, they talk about this, like the metaphor for this word. It's very interesting, actually. The word Tathagata this is how the Buddha referred to himself, as the Tathagata, the one thus gone, is sometimes how it's translated. Let's see, I looked it up here. Yeah, the definition I really like, the one who has gone to suchness, the one who has gone or who has arrived at suchness. So this is how the Buddha referred to himself, not as me, not using personal pronouns. At least that's how the texts have recorded, these conversations with the Buddha. He refers to himself as suchness, and it's related to this word that's used periodically in the early texts about the way it is, thusness, the suchness of the moment. So when we're here in the moment, like we're just wherever your hands are touching now, and we can feel those sensations of touch. So do that now for me, if you would, just like I'm doing it for myself, just aware of sensation. And then we can recognize that we're aware of these sensations of touch. That touch is being known. And you maybe can sense into it, there's no duality there. There's something whole or complete or inclusive, nothing inside and outside about that experience. Because so much of what we take to be reality, is actually a construction of the thinking mind, not the experience, not our subjective experience itself. And this is how a simple moment of mindful awareness can just give us the flavor of the resolution of duality. A lot of times reading spiritual texts, we can think of that insight into non-duality as some, mystical experience that's way off in the distance when we're a hermit or a saint or, special. Then we'll have that experience of unification and wholeness and inclusivity and universality, and we'll have that deep emotional, psychological healing, spiritual healing, and then we'll be good. But the problem is we have an idea of that kind of spiritual healing, and the idea is never going to be it. The idea will never be close to the experience, and so we keep missing the possibility of the experience. So one of the ways we support this healing, tasting non-duality, opening to non-duality, is we get to learn how to see duality. We see that push and pull of our likes and dislikes. And we can then, the heart knows more clearly what needs to be let go of, what attachment is, and how attachment releases. Not so much you or I letting go, but more, in a sense, the practitioner noticing the letting go of attachment. Not doing it, but realizing a moment of non-attachment. And the suchness, the thusness, a little taste of Buddha nature, a little taste of how the Buddha presumably experienced his existence after his awakening. We can have, just like I said at the beginning of the sit when I was talking about metta, loving kindness, how just that shift into kindness can resolve so much of our dualistic drama of likes and dislikes and what do people think about me, because we've gone to sort of doing justice or orbiting around my sense of need, my sense of who I am and who I want to be and how I want to be seen, to this movement of generosity, of caring for, appreciating, wishing well for, contributing to, showing up for. And that all of them are just different expressions of dana, generosity, which we talk a lot about at the center. Learning how to inhabit these circles of giving and receiving, and not neurotically misunderstanding that. A long time ago, I think in June, one of the community members, Nancy, sent this article to the people who were doing the community practice intensive in June by Norman Fisher, a really wonderful Buddhist teacher from the Zen tradition here in the States. He's also a poet, Norman Fisher is. And he's just talking about some of the traditional Zen teachings on dana, on generosity. And he talks about this chant they do a lot in the Zen tradition. May we with all beings realize the emptiness of the three wheels: giver, receiver, and gift. So not getting stuck, like how to be a giver without getting stuck with the idea of being the giver. How to be a receiver, someone who's receiving something without that getting sticky. How to be the gift, like our words, our actions can be the gift without getting stuck on how skillful the words are, how skillful my actions are. Right? And that's the idea. Thusness, this word the Buddha used to describe him. In earlier, more ancient Indian texts, like the Mahabharata is a famous text that the Bhagavad Gita, some of you might have heard of, is embedded in this greater epic poem in ancient Indian culture called the Mahabharata. And in that text, that's where they use this image for thusness, suchness, as a bird flies through the sky but doesn't leave a trace, as a fish swims through the water and doesn't leave a trace. Then, later then the Buddha uses this term. As a Buddha spends 45 years teaching in northern India, but doesn't leave any neurotic trace. That's the idea. Or you and I, in moments, perhaps, when the mind, the heart is in a deeper balance, really intimate, but not entangled with attachment, then in those moments, perhaps we can be without leaving any trace. And especially any trace in terms of our own sensitive hearts. So we're acting, we're letting those currents of desire flow into action, into thought, into words, but there's no reverberation with those currents. And here's a beautiful poem. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard this. It's quite famous now, and I think was originally written in the late 80s by Thich Nhat Hanh, this famous, beautiful Buddhist monk and teacher, and grateful that he spent so many decades in the West, having gotten kicked out of Vietnam during the Vietnam War in the late 60s because he was a peace activist. And nobody liked him, the South Vietnamese government, the US government, the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. So he wasn't allowed back in when he went to the Paris peace talks back in the late 60s. And he taught for many decades here in the West. Now he's back in Vietnam as quite old Buddhist monk, probably his last days or weeks, months. And this is a poem called Please Call Me by My True Names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today I am still arriving. Look deeply at every second. I am arriving to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I'm a mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I'm the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am a 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am the member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true name so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true name so I can wake up and the door of my heart could be left open, the door of compassion. So here Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about how love, this here he's talking about compassion, but just the space of love, it gives us this confident taste in the heart, not identified, not attached to these currents. So that's how we learn to let the currents flow through us, is this idea. See, initially, we just let the currents do what they want to do, right? We let desire do what it wants to do. And we're kind of in that more dog eat dog world and trying to get what we want and avoid what we don't want. And then we feel like, okay, I'm going to manage these desires and make them go where I want them to go. And that sort of works and ultimately doesn't work. And then slowly, after so many mistakes, so many wrong turns of trying to give up on or dominate these currents of desires, there's a way that we learn to let them move through us, to animate our lives. And it's really this slow, gradual movement from living through our self-centeredness and realizing that that isn't the only option, to personalize the currents of life energy, right? And it's, we have simple ways of talking about it, like giving our life away or living in a generous way. But practice is really about operationalizing, like, what does that look like when my child is nagging again for this or that, or our cat is nagging for this or that, or my partner or my friend, or when the world and the people around us seem to have so many needs that we can't meet. What does that look like to allow the currents of desire of life energy to move through us? We want to have a lot of humility about that. And what kind of gives us that capacity to be interested and to trust that there's a way to be a human being with these currents of desire without doing the same old, like acting them out in a personal way with personal agendas. And in the article that's came out with this poem, so a long time ago, it's really a talk that Thich Nhat Hanh gave that they then transcribed. He talks about something he talks quite a bit about over the many years of his teaching, this image of the waves on the top of the ocean, and how these waves have their own birth and death. They have their own life, their own very particular characteristics, shaped by the wind, shaped by the currents, and the other motions shaped by the placement of the moon, everything, so many causes and conditions shaping that each specific wave having its very particular qualities. And so human beings were a little bit like that. We're these unique arisings, this body, this conditioned heart, conditioned by my own very particular location and culture, parenting, all the things that, even the genetic code that I received, all of that specificity then uniquely arises as, this life we call Mark's life, Mark Nunberg's life in this moment. But that uniqueness of the wave, as true as that is, doesn't in any way remove it from the ocean, from the great immensity, the great depth and breadth of the ocean. So that wave in all its uniqueness is also part of this totality. And what the ocean teaches the wave is basically not to take the specifics so seriously with such a sense of self-importance. And what the uniqueness of the wave teaches the ocean is just the beauty in this diversity and complexity, and often the messiness of life, and the diversity of life, and how it's playing out in all its uniqueness, like this moment, the dance we have with all the people around us in our families and intimate relations and in the wider world. And so when we do this work of sort of, I want to say neutralizing, but sort of resolving duality, it's so that we can actually more fully live in that world of dualities, of these currents of likes and dislikes, these desires, so that we can feel them moving through us as someone with a body, someone with a conditioned heart, an emotional heart, sensitive heart, someone in relationship, someone who's moved by this and touched by that. We can let our life be animated without being confused, because we have a taste, and over time greater confidence and taste of the ocean. It really allows us to find ways to express these currents that isn't, the expression isn't all about this imagined sense of self that needs to be defended, needs to be protected. And that's what, that's what we sense in other people when we see them acting and speaking and showing up in ways that seems to come from a really deep place, not from their particular location. But it's not, that expression is totally through the uniqueness of their particular location, who they are, how they've been conditioned, that particular voice, that particular body, acting and speaking in that particular way, but really connected to the breadth and depth, the totality of the moment, the suchness or the thusness. And I think this really helps us. A while back, maybe a year ago, I gave a number of talks. Maybe we even did a workshop on identities. And, there can be a lot of confusion, a lot of this agitation and push and pull around identities, kind of swinging back and forth from where we're triggered by people being, ourselves being, and other people being identified with their identities, whatever they might be, and then swing to the other place where finding it so important and valuable to use one's identity, or how other people use identities to clarify the situation. And identities, whatever they might be, around gender, around race, around class, around sex and sexual orientation, or any of these spectrums of difference that, colors make up our world. We have to be in the world of identities. So it's really a question of how to use them skillfully, to see clearly, to do this dance without leaving these painful traces of suffering in our own heart and everybody else's heart. So we use identities, like whatever they might be, even the identity of being a spiritual practitioner, we may use that to help us see the other alternative, which is to think that sensual pleasures makes a life worth living in the end. And so the spiritual identity maybe can illuminate how hollow that other path might be. Just like me getting clear about my male identity or my white identity, and really owning that, using it in a moment pragmatically, skillfully, can really help me see how I might be complicit, part of systems that cause suffering in ways. Or basically see what I'm not seeing in a particular relationship. Oh, this is an expression of maleness. It's not about hating myself or judging myself. It's about wanting to be skillful, which requires seeing things as they are. really illuminating the moment. So much of how we use identities and how we resolve duality is by getting interested. And this is another famous poem. Some of you know this, Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye. And I'm just going to read the last stanza because it's talking about the necessity of resolving, like to understand kindness, we have to understand sorrow. So she writes, before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows, and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you've been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. So maybe this is a good time to just get curious about looking, owning, not judging these ways that we get pushed and pulled by the dualities, by our likes and dislikes, by our identities, by other people's identities, how they're establishing themselves, and how to more and more practically, pragmatically use this messy world to see, to not get stuck, but to see how alive it is. Because that's really the joy in life. The suffering in life comes from thinking we've got to give up on these currents of desires or try to manage them. And the joy in life comes when we learn how to let these currents do what they're meant to do, which is move. You know, we talk about entering the stream, giving up on all the ways we tend to get stuck or fixated. This is from Thomas Merton. In humility is the greatest freedom. As long as you have to defend the imaginary self that you think is important, you lose your peace of heart. As soon as you compare that shadow with the shadow of other people, you lose all joy. Because you have begun to trade in unrealities, and there is no joy in things that do not exist. Yeah, the joy comes in entering the stream of what does exist. So in a sense, what doesn't exist is the habitual ways we interpret or define these currents. What does exist are these currents, these life energies. And the question is, how can they move freely, naturally, in beautiful ways? And so to begin with, you might just explore the teachings on dana that we often talk about at the center, and just start where places in your life that are relatively easy. You often hear us talk about it in terms of your relationship to the center, to common ground itself. But just start in with relationships that are relatively not complicated. So like not with your intimate partner, or maybe not with your children initially. Ideally, eventually, but maybe not initially. Start where it's really simple, where you can reimagine the relationship as this free movement of these currents of life, where you get to be that unrestricted movement, that unrestricted activity of emotion and thought and bodily action. You get to get out of the way. Life gets to move through you, and you get a deeper, hopefully a deeper taste of freedom. And you understand what people mean by that, free giving and free receiving, or not being tight. Like how to be in relationship with that person or that situation without being tight. I mean, I practice it. Some of you know I live 7 blocks away from the center. I'm at the center now here in Minneapolis. So I walked over this morning before this talk, and I had that thought, okay, this is a pretty simple, uncomplicated. I don't have a neurotic relationship to these 7 blocks or to walking. So it's a relatively simple training ground to just allow the currents of life to flow, to get from A to B, from home to common ground with no trace, and to allow it to be this activity of love and joy, this free movement of dana, generosity, with nothing left over. So I don't feel proud when I'm made it to the center and I was a good Buddhist or something like that. That would be, an unnecessary weight in my heart. But how to do these simple things? So probably most of us, after this talk ends in a few seconds, we're going to be doing pretty ordinary things. So let some of those ordinary things be teachers. What does it look like to let these currents of living, currents of life energy move? Letting Mark or letting you be you, as we say, and just in the simplicity of some of these life situations, just to see how life knows how to do its thing. And we don't have to be the one who's given up, who's frustrated, who feels betrayed by life. We don't have to be the one who feels masterful and has gained and owns and, dependent on one's competence. We don't have to be anybody whatsoever. And that's that, thusness that the Buddha used to refer to himself, the Tathagata, the one, that is beyond birth and death, beyond gain and loss, beyond these 8 worldly winds. So I wish that for all of us, to be our wise and useful teachers. And just a few announcements before we end. So this coming Sunday, several of us leaders who identify as males or with masculinity, Omkar, Malik, Lewis, Rob, Gabe, and myself, will be leading our next masculinity community conversation at 12:30 Sunday afternoon. That's the 23rd. So you can register for that, so we have a sense of how many people will be coming. Will help us plan how many small groups we want to do, or maybe keep it as a whole group if it's just a few folks. I'll be leading a day-long retreat on the 22nd. That's this coming Saturday. I think it begins at 9:30 and ends at 4. You can sign up for that also on our public calendar. Shelley Graff and I will be doing the 5-day Labor Day retreat beginning Wednesday evening, ending on Monday of Labor Day. I think that's the 7th of September. You can sign up from the calendar. And then all the regular programs are continuing. Check the ongoing calendar for what's coming up, and please join in. I know that Patrice will be leading a half-day retreat a little bit later, maybe the first Saturday in September, I believe, and somebody will be doing the loving kindness practice each Friday night at 8:30. So really nice to be with everybody. Wishing you all safety and health and good practice, and look forward to connecting down the road.